I always believed in trust. Trust was the foundation of our marriage, a silent contract we'd signed with every shared look, every whispered promise. At least that's what I thought. 10 years in, with 2 beautiful children and a life we'd built brick by brick, I thought nothing could shake us. Then came the trip. Sophie, my wife, had been planning a getaway with her college friends. A 5-day escape to the sun-drenched beaches of Azulmar, a place that seemed plucked straight from the glossy pages of a travel magazine. She'd been excited. Her face lit up every time she talked about it. And why wouldn't she be? Sophie deserved a break, a chance to unwind. I encouraged her, waving off her concerns about leaving me alone with the kids. Go have fun, I said, smiling. You've earned it. She hesitated, her hand lingering on mine. Are you sure? 5 days is a long time. Of course, Sophie. It'll be fine. The kids and I can handle it. Her smile then was genuine, warm. Felt like an unspoken thank you. The next morning, she kissed me goodbye at the airport, her perfume lingering in the air as I watched her disappear into the crowd. She texted me updates on her flight, sent pictures of the villa they were staying in, the food, the ocean. Everything seemed normal, until it wasn't. When Sophie came back, she was different. Not drastically, just subtly. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe the transition from carefree days to the demands of home was taking its toll. But little things piled up. The way she kept her phone close, something she'd never done before. The way her eyes darted away when I asked her about her trip. One evening, as we sat on the couch, the kids tucked in bed, I decided to ask, "Everything okay?" Kept my tone light, casual. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be?" she replied too quickly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I let it go. Maybe I was overthinking, but that gnawing feeling in my gut told me otherwise. 3 days later, I found out I wasn't imagining things. It was a quiet Friday night. I was putting the kids to bed when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Curious, I opened the message. 2 photos stared back at me, and my world cracked open. The first image showed Sophie at a beach bar, seated too close to a man I didn't recognize. His arm rested on her shoulder like it belonged there. She was laughing, carefree. The second photo was worse. Her sitting on his lap, leaning into him, their intimacy undeniable. Beneath the photos was a message. Asterisk, you deserve to know the truth. Meet me tomorrow at 7 p.m. I'll explain everything. Asterisk. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. The photos burned into my memory, each detail sharper than the last. Who was this man? Who had sent the message? And most importantly, why? My stomach churned with disbelief and anger. But beneath it all was a cold, gnawing pain. Betrayal. The word thudded in my mind like a drumbeat. That night, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, the images resurfaced. Sophie's laugh, her hand resting on his. A stranger where I thought safety was. Morning couldn't come fast enough, though the dread of what awaited me grew with each passing hour. The following day was agony. I went through the motions: breakfast, laundry, playing with the kids, all while counting the hours. The clock ticked toward 7 p.m. with the precision of a blade cutting through my resolve. At 6:59, my phone buzzed again. Asterisk, Old Town Cafe. Booth by the window. Asterisk. My breath hitched. Old Town Cafe. A relic from our city's past. Its neon sign barely holding onto its glow. I knew the place. I'd been there before. My hands shook as I grabbed my jacket and headed out, my mind racing with questions I didn't want answers to. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a woman sitting alone by the window. At first, I didn't recognize her, but as I stepped closer, my heart sank. It was Clara, Sophie's closest friend, her confidant, the one person who'd always been by her side. Through college, our wedding, everything. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mixture of regret and resolve. "Hey, Eric," she said, her voice low. "Sit down." I slid into the seat opposite her, every muscle in my body coiled tight. Clara pushed her phone toward me without a word. The screen lit up with more photos. Sophie and that man again. This time, There was no mistaking what was happening. Their kiss was deep, passionate. My stomach lurched as I swiped through the gallery, each image worse than the last. Why? I finally managed to ask, my voice hoarse. Clara's gaze softened, but her words were sharp. Because you deserve to know the truth, Eric. She's been lying to you, and not just about him. Her words hit me like a freight train. Not just about him? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Clara nodded, her jaw tightening as if she were bracing herself for the storm about to break. Eric. She's been seeing this guy for months. His name is Mark. But he's not the only one. There's someone else too. She paused, her eyes searching mine for any sign of understanding. It's been going on for a while. Longer than I even want to admit. My chest tightened, anger and despair swirling together into a storm I could barely contain. How long? The words felt like they were dragged out of me, sharp and heavy. Clara hesitated. Almost a year, she admitted, her voice trembling. At first I thought it was a phase, something she'd snap out of. But she didn't. And every time I told her to stop, she'd just laugh it off, like it wasn't a big deal. My fists clenched under the table, my knuckles white. And you're just telling me now? After a year? Her face crumpled. I didn't know how, Eric. I thought if I told her, it might ruin everything. Your marriage, your family. I didn't want to be the one responsible for that. Ruin everything? My voice rose, anger finally breaking through the fog of shock. Clara, she already ruined everything. And you let it happen. I know, Clara whispered, her voice thick with guilt. I know, and I'm sorry, but you needed to hear it. You needed to see it for yourself. I pushed back my chair abruptly, the screech of metal on tile cutting through the quiet hum of the cafe. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. I can't do this right now. Clara didn't try to stop me as I turned and walked out into the night, the weight of her confession pressing down on me like a mountain. The drive home was a blur, my thoughts spiraling into chaos. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark, save for the soft glow of the living room lamp. Sophie was waiting. She was curled up on the couch, her phone in hand. The moment I stepped inside, she looked up, her face brightening with relief. Hey, where were you? I was starting to. Stop, I said sharply, cutting her off. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Her smile faltered, confusion and unease flickering across her face. Eric, what's going on? She asked, her voice cautious. I crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling out my phone and holding it up to her. The photos Clara had shown me glared back at her, every pixel a dagger aimed at the fragile facade she'd constructed. Her face went pale. Eric, I can explain. Explain what? I snapped, my voice trembling with fury. Explain how you've been lying to me? Cheating on me? For months. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time in years, Sophie looked truly speechless. I pressed on, my words spilling out in a torrent of anger and heartbreak. How long, Sophie? How long have you been making a fool out of me? Of our family? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't let them sway me. It's not what you think, she whispered, her voice breaking. Eric, I didn't mean for this to happen. You didn't mean for it to happen? I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and cold. You don't accidentally end up in another man's arms, Sophie. You don't accidentally betray your husband and your kids. Her tears fell freely now, her hands trembling as she reached for me. Please, Eric, let me explain. I wasn't happy. I felt trapped, like I'd lost myself. And Mark, he made me feel alive again. Alive? I repeated, my voice rising. And what about me? What about our children? Did we mean nothing to you? You mean everything to me, she cried, her voice raw with desperation. Eric, I love you. I never stopped loving you. Love? I spat the word like it was poison. If this is love, Sophie, then I want no part of it. She sank onto the couch, her sobs echoing through the room. For a moment, I just stood there, watching the woman I thought I knew crumble before me. But no amount of tears could erase what she'd done. "I trusted you," I said finally, my voice low and steady. "I gave you everything, Sophie, and you threw it away." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. "Eric, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes." I shook my head, the weight of her betrayal settling over me like a shroud. "It's too late," I said, my voice firm. "You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Sophie's sobs grew louder, but I didn't stay to comfort her. I turned and walked out of the room, each step feeling heavier than the last. Upstairs, I checked on the kids, their peaceful faces a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding downstairs. As I watched them sleep, I made a silent vow. They didn't deserve to grow up in a home filled with lies and betrayal, and I didn't deserve to live in one. The days that followed were a blur of tension and quiet despair. Sophie tried to carry on as if nothing had changed, but the cracks in our lives were impossible to ignore. The air in the house was heavy with unspoken words, and every glance she threw my way was tinged with guilt and desperation. I avoided her as much as I could, pouring all my energy into the kids. They didn't know what was happening. Not yet, but they could sense the unease. I caught our eldest, Mia, watching me with wide, curious eyes one afternoon. "Daddy, are you and Mommy mad at each other?" she asked softly. Her question nearly broke me. "No, sweetheart," I lied, pulling her into a hug. "Mommy and Daddy just have a lot on their minds." But the lie tasted bitter, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. Sophie cornered me one evening after the kids were asleep. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Eric, please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk." I didn't respond, keeping my focus on the dishes I was scrubbing in the sink. The silence stretched until she couldn't bear it any longer. "I know I've hurt you," she continued, stepping closer, "and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But Eric, I'm begging you, for the sake of our family, for the kids. Please, let's try to fix this." Her words should have stirred something in me. Anger, sympathy, hope, anything. But all I felt was exhaustion. "Sophie," I said quietly, turning to face her, "you didn't just hurt me. You destroyed us. You broke something that can't be fixed." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "A terrible, horrible mistake. But I love you, Eric. That's the truth." I shook my head. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. Love isn't just words, Sophie. It's actions. And your actions made it very clear where I stand." Tears streamed down her face, but I forced myself to look away. Her pain didn't absolve her of what she'd done. "I'm filing for divorce," I said finally, the words cold and final. Sophie's knees buckled, and she sank onto a chair. "Eric, please," she whispered, her voice raw. "Don't do this. Think about the kids. They need us both." "I am thinking about them," I said firmly. "They deserve a stable, honest home, not one built on lies." Her sobs echoed in the quiet kitchen, but I didn't stay to comfort her. Couldn't. The next day I called a lawyer. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. Breaking the news to the kids was gut-wrenching. Sophie and I sat them down together, trying to explain in terms they could understand. "Mommy and Daddy won't be living in the same house anymore," I said gently, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. "Why?" Mia asked, her voice small and trembling. "Did we do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," Sophie said quickly, her voice thick with tears. "This isn't about you or your brother. Mommy and Daddy just can't be together anymore." Their cries shattered what little resolve I had left, but I held them close, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. Sophie's betrayal didn't end with the emotional scars. The divorce proceedings were a battlefield. She fought me on everything: custody, the house, even the dog. The woman I once saw as my partner had become a stranger, her sharp words cutting deeper than I thought possible. But amidst the chaos, I found moments of clarity. Clara, despite her role in exposing the truth, became an unlikely ally. She checked in on me, offering support when I needed it most. "You're stronger than you think," she said one evening over coffee. "And your kids are lucky to have you." Her words stuck with me, a beacon of hope in the storm. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt an odd mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that the battle was over. Sorrow for what we'd lost. But as I walked out of the courthouse, the sun warming my face, I realized something important. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. I poured myself into rebuilding my life, not for Sophie, not even for revenge, but for myself and the kids. I found joy in the little things. Mia's giggle as we played board games. Max's pride when he showed me his latest school project. These moments reminded me of what truly mattered. Sophie and I remained civil for the sake of the kids, but our relationship was nothing more than co-parenting. She tried to reach out a few times, apologizing, asking if there was any chance for reconciliation. My answer was always the same. No. Forgiveness might come one day, but trust was something she'd never earn back. As time passed, I began to heal. The scars Sophie left behind didn't define me. They shaped me. I was stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever to create a life worth living. For myself, for my children. In the end, betrayal didn't break me. It forged me into something unshakable.